number 5 Washington at number 11 Oregon State, the biggest game of this weekend, 7:30 p.m. on ABC. The storyline is, honestly, is this finally the week that Washington goes down? They've been playing with fire recently, Dalton. The first 6 games of their season, the first 4 games of the season, they won by an average of 33 points. In their last 6 games, they've won by an average of 7 points. Now, you go to Corvallis to take on an Oregon State team. Now, of course, the first 4 games, they played relatively easier opponents, but still, it says a lot in their last 6. They haven't played, difficult opponents in every game, and they're still only winning by an average of a touchdown per game. You're going to Corvallis right now, take on Oregon State, and for the first time this season, Washington is entering the game as the underdog. They're 2.5-point underdogs right now to Oregon State. So, big storyline, honestly, is this really the week? Finally, the week that we lose one of our 5 undefeated Power 5 teams. Will this be the week that Washington goes down? Is my ultimate storyline in this game.
It's the big story, and I think what them being underdogs is based on obviously his recent performance, but I think conference games, and like Utah's a good team, and USC's still a good team. They got Caleb Williams, and the one game I think we kind of side eye at, obviously, the Arizona State game. But Arizona State they've been playing everybody tough, man. I'm like I watched their game this past week against, I believe it was, they upset UCLA, didn't they? Yeah. They upset UCLA. They had Scatteraboo playing quarterback for like a third of the game. Throwing 9 routes and doing all this. I mean, they just are like finding ways. They're like that. They're that annoying team with the not good record that you just don't want to play because they just do all sorts of weird stuff, man. I'm telling you, I watched. I had that UCLA Arizona State game for some stuff earlier this week, and I was like, this team is strange. They come up with everything. So I'm not gonna hold. I don't hold all that against Washington in the same way that I don't really hold it against Florida State. Like I see too much of this narrative where, well, they won close games. Well, these are good football teams and they won. Yeah. Get over it. Like, it's still Michael Penix. It's still Roma Dunze. It's still a bunch of Dylan Johnson had another 100-yard game last week. Look, Utah, there was a road where they could give them problems. And I think the biggest complaint right now is Washington's defense. Best defense in the country? No, absolutely not. But they sure show up when they need them to. Every time they need them to show up, right? You had, I believe it was a pick 6 against Arizona State. They did just enough against Oregon on 4th down. USC, you give up 42 to USC. That's kind of like an average day, to be honest with you. Their defense shows up when it needs to. And look, the big thing for me in this game is this is actually a bad matchup for both teams.
Yeah.
Washington is underdogs based on road game and Oregon State's run game.
Yep.
I totally get it. Horrible matchup. Washington, I believe, is 76th in run defense grade. Oregon's the best run-blocking team in the country. Talisi Fuaga is going to find himself in the first round. Damian Martinez, an animal. Deshaun Fenwick. Don't forget him, too. Big physical presence. I actually coached against this guy once or twice when he was in high school. Hammer. Absolutely. We were just too small to tackle him at St. Pete. I'll be honest with you. He just, over the course of, he had like a slow grinding like 220 or 230 on us, and it was just over and over. Mm-hmm. Oregon State's so physical. I totally get why this is a problem for Washington. On the other side, though, Oregon State, I've got questions about their pass defense and if they can actually cover. Okay, because you look at their coverage grade, I think is about a 90 and kind of tilted towards the top 20. But they have not played a ton of great units. Yep. And the decent units they have played, the 3 I'm going to highlight are Washington State and Arizona and Colorado. 62.8 coverage grade in those 3 games. And they don't get a ton of pressure. I'm not sure that Oregon State can hold up in coverage against these guys. They don't blitz a lot. It's weird. Like the way they get pressure. So every team gets pressure in different ways. Some teams are just really darn good. UCLA, they don't need to blitz. They got freaks, right? Some teams, stunt and do weird stuff and find pressure, like we talked about Missouri a couple weeks ago, right? Where it was like they stunt and they find space and they confuse you mentally. Oregon State doesn't send extra guys. They do a lot of what's called simulated pressure, think the second highest rate in the Power 5, where they'll show you 4, they'll drop off somebody up front, and they'll send somebody from a different direction. It's still 4, but it looks weird. That's why it's simulated, because you think they're blitzing and they're actually not. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you don't truly blitz Penix, look, I believe it's the only passer in the country better against 4 pass rushers or less is McCarthy. And McCarthy, I mean, that's in like a third of the pass attempts of Penix, because even when it's a close game, he doesn't have to throw the ball in the second half. Yeah. So I don't even Michael Penix. If you don't blitz him, there's nobody better. And if Oregon State, I said it with Utah last week, if you don't go get him, he's going to kill you if you let him stand back there. Washington's offensive line is still really good. I have issues with Oregon State in this matchup too. I don't know if they can cover these guys. I'm tempted to think they can, because most teams can't, right? And we've seen even, especially against Arizona. I mean, it's a struggle. I think this is far and away the best passing team they'll play, and they haven't played a ton of good ones. But the ones they have played, it's been Washington State put up. Well, that was when we were talking about Cam Ward on the edges of the Heisman race because of what he did to Oregon State. Honestly, now we look back and I go, well, maybe this Oregon State secondary is an issue. Yeah. Maybe the pass rush. They don't have anybody who can win one-on-one in the pass rush. Mm-hmm. They have to find pressure, and if they can't create any, for as good as a run game is, I mean, obviously you're always worried about how in the world do we stop Penix, but I would be more worried about it if I'm the Beavers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the matchup I was going to say too. Is they really have 2 contrasting offenses and really 2 defenses that I'm worried about in defending those offenses, where Oregon State is a physical team. They might be the most physical. I would say they are the most physical offense in college football right now with what they're doing. They lead the nation, like you said, in run blocking grade, 10th in the Power 5 in yards before contact per attempt at about 2.5 yards before even contact they're getting per attempt. And then Washington's defense, meanwhile, you mentioned, is like 73rd in team run defense grade this year. And then DJ Uiagalelei, it's not even like Washington could put 8 or 9 in the box. DJ's had a decent year. They're playing to his strengths, like we talked about before the show. I mean, he's really having a better year than a lot of people anticipated. I think he's playing really well for Oregon State right now as kind of a compliment to that. He's not going to lead them to victory, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, he's a very good complementary quarterback for what they want to do, and he can get out and run too. He's a very physical guy in the run game, so that's another dangerous thing as well. And then on the other side of the ball, you mentioned it. I mean, their bread and butter on Washington is having an explosive passing game with a Heisman candidate at quarterback in Michael Penix Jr., and the highest graded receiving core in the country right now with Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk. Hopefully, Jalen McMillan can hopefully get back in this game. I'm not sure what his status is, but even without him, they still have one of the best receiving cores in college football. Now, Oregon State has been the 18th best defense in the country in terms of how often it's allowed 15-plus yard passes, explosive passes this year at 11.6%. But like you mentioned, they're not playing that many explosive passing games. This is a whole new animal that you have in Washington. They haven't played an offense that's even comparable to Washington's this year because, quite frankly, there aren't many offenses in college football that are even comparable to Washington's this year. So I am worried about both defenses in this game kind of just dealing with the 2 different offenses that you have to go against in the physicality of Oregon State and then the explosiveness of Washington. I think there's a chance that we could, I don't know if it'd be a shootout with how often Oregon State runs the ball, but I mean, we'll get into the final score right now. I think both teams are scoring in the 30s in this game, if I had to predict.
Yeah, I think so, but I think there's a couple of, there's 2 guys we haven't mentioned, you didn't mention there that I think could be the difference in this game. Dylan Johnson, look, This Washington team, I said it last week, I'm going to say it again. Good as Penix is, great as the receivers are, they are at their absolute best, balanced. When Dylan Johnson, another 100-yard game last week, when they get Johnson going, Penix is the best play-action passer in the country. Or no, he's second behind Jayden Daniels now. He's second behind Jayden Daniels and everything because Daniels should win the Heisman. We'll get on that. We'll be on that more later, don't worry. They're at their best with balance. Okay, Dylan Johnson, play action, under center. Physically, I want to be honest, like offensively, these 2 offensive lines could have field days, I'll be honest with you. I think Dylan Johnson and a guy we haven't talked about much, Braylon Trice, edge rusher for Washington, okay? DJ Uiagalelei, clean grade, somewhere around 90, top 20, 90, 91, somewhere in there. 59.4. Under pressure. Get to him. And look, Oregon State, it's tough. They use a lot of max protection. Oregon State's offense is outside zone, stretch, keep running off tackle, and then play action and take a shot over the top. Max protection, like 2, maybe 3 receivers on the route. Uiagalelei, look, man, you're going to throw the ball 20 times a game, and they're all going to be at least 15 yards. We're taking shots when people step up, deep overs, go balls, posts. That's it. They have leaned. Why they're successful? They've leaned into his strengths, which Clemson never did. When he was at Clemson, they didn't do it. Lean into his strengths. He's a vertical passer, max protect, give him time. All right, play action, anything you can do to give him more time. Cool. If you're Washington and you've got the guy in Braylon Trice leading the nation in pressures, this is your X factor. Is Uiagalelei under pressure late in the play when he's got to start moving around? It's weird because he's got a cannon, but off platform, accuracy's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Those two guys, I think, could be the difference in this game, one on each side. Braylon Trice, and against Fuaga, what a great matchup we've got, Trice against this offense. We got some edge rushers this week, man, don't we? I mean, my goodness. But you're talking about – I really think – I'm curious to see where this game goes if Oregon State doesn't run for 8 yards a clip. And if Braylon Trice can get pressure, which he's got one of the best pass rush grades in the nation, he's leading the country in pressures. We want to rip Washington's D, but we're going to talk about what they do right. And this guy is what they do right, and he could make a major difference.
Yeah, I got to look real quick to see if Trice matches up a lot with the right tackle, because that's, again, I talked about 2 edge on tackle matchups that I really like, and that's another one. Honestly, man, I'm mad at myself that I didn't talk about that one, because Braylon Trice against Talisa Fuaga is fantastic. I actually have an insane stat here, Dalton, that I found a couple weeks ago, and it still holds true right now. So since PFF began charting college football in 2014, the most pressures in a game by a Power 5 defender in first place was Braylon Trice last year against Washington State. He had 18 pressures against Washington State in that one game. In second place is Braylon Trice against Stanford this year with 16 pressures against Stanford in this year's game. And then in third place was Aiden Hutchinson. If you remember that 2021 Ohio State game when he literally took over that game, 15 pressures against Ohio State. That
was probably the best game I've ever seen a defensive end play in college.
Yeah.
That was nuts.
Especially with all the NFL tackles that Ohio State had, was insane. But just how insane is it that is the third most that we've ever seen by a Power 5 edge defender? The first and second most in a single game for pressures is both Braylon Trice. This guy has games, man, where he had 18 pressures last year against Washington State. He had 16 this year against Stanford. And then that's the most we've ever seen for a single game by a Power 5 defender. And it's both Braylon Trice. So, yes, I agree with you, man. He is a fantastic, fantastic player who could be getting a lot of reps, against Talisa Fuaga. So, yeah, I am really, really excited to see what he can do this year. Now, he does play a lot against the left tackle, but at the same time, I think we will get some matchups with him against Talisa Fuaga, at least in this game. Ultimately, Dalton, Oregon State's favorite right now. Does the number 11 team ruin Washington's perfect season?
I'm just, call me stubborn. I'm not going to take Washington. I'm not going to take Washington to lose. I'm not even. I think they're going to get to the Pac-12 title game undefeated. I just. It's stable. You've got Penix. What's working is working, and I know it's not as dominant, but you get in these conference games where everybody knows you and they watch your tape all off season and all this stuff. It's hard, right? Now they do. They have to not give up 300 plus rushing, right? That's true. They have to play better in the first half of some of these games, right? But I have enough questions about Oregon State's defense, and if Washington can find their way ahead. If I'm Washington, let's turbo this game up, man, because Oregon State's going to want to slow it down.
Yep.
They're going to take the whole 40 seconds, and they're going to try to wear them out slow grind. If I'm Washington, I might take the ball first and go no huddle and just get into it. Don't get into all these simulated pressure looks and whatever else they want to show you. I wouldn't do any of that. I would go right down the field, first drive, no huddle, let's go. And I want to challenge this Oregon State secondary, because I think this is one of those games, I've mentioned them in past weeks. Whoever scores first is going to be living right. I think you want, especially for Oregon State, they want to be ahead and run the ball and out physical you and kill the clock. They don't want to drop back. Look, 90. I would bet, I'd have to see the numbers, but I would bet 80 to 90% of Uiagalelei's best throws play action.
Mm-hmm.
Get ahead of them. Don't let them just run every play, and they'll stay patient. Look, if they're only down 7, well, they keep running the ball. They're going to do what they do. Get them down 10, 13, 14, late in the third quarter. Get them to drop back. This Oregon State team doesn't want to be in the drop back game. I think there's more ways for Washington to win this game. I totally get the road. I kind of sort of get why Oregon State's favored, although I don't agree with it necessarily. I don't think this should go beyond maybe a pick 'em.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really about Oregon State being favored here. It's stable. I know what they're going to do. If Martinez and Fenwick and even DJ run for 400 yards, can they win this game? Sure. I'm not picking against Washington maybe until the Pac-12 title game.
I'm picking Washington as well.
Let me get you a score. Sorry. 38-31 Washington.
Okay, I'm going 34-31. I got Washington win this game as well. I think I talked about it before. I think Oregon State. I like Oregon State a lot this year. Don't get me wrong. I really do. I think they're a really good team. I think they're a top 20 team in the country for sure. I think right now having them at number 11 is awful. Now, of course, it'll play out, and we'll see what happens with them at the rest of the season. I don't agree with them being number 11 right now, man. I really don't.
How much lower would you put them? Where do you have them?
17. I don't think what they've done this year is that impressive, honestly. I mean, they beat Utah, sure. They lost to Arizona, lost to Washington State.
UCLA.
Beat UCLA. I don't like UCLA that much.
Which I guess isn't in hindsight, but 11. I don't know how many spots I would drop them down. You have them at 17.
Yeah. So they beat. So really, they beat Utah. They beat UCLA. They beat Colorado. That's it. They beat Cal. They beat San Diego State, UC Davis, and San Jose State. Like I just what their resume shows this year. I
might put them at. See, I don't think Penn State should be ahead of Ole Miss or Oklahoma even. I would probably go like this. I would probably still go. I'd go Ole Miss 11, Oklahoma 12, Oregon State 13, and Penn State 14.
So I have. So just for people who are wondering so I have the same top 10 as the committee. I have Louisville at 9, but I have the same top 10, and that Missouri is number 10. I got Ole Miss at 11. I got Penn State at 12. I got James Madison at 13, which I understand they're not in the playoff committee, but I love what they've done this year. I got Oklahoma at 14. I got LSU and Notre Dame at 15 to 16. I understand they have 3 losses this year, but I still think their resumes are better than Oregon State, and I still think LSU and Notre Dame are better teams than Oregon State as well. So I still have them. That might be a little too much, and I understand. So 15, I would understand, but I don't think you can put them above Oklahoma.
That's a fun one. Is there a road where we could get a Notre Dame Oregon State bowl game? Is that possible? I would love that. I would love that game. I'd want to see that.
Yeah, that'd be a really good one, and that would definitely be one that we preview when we do preview the bowl games. But yeah, I would put them behind a lot of the 2-loss teams right now, and then I would also put them behind even LSU and Notre Dame. Like I think. I don't know. I just think their resume does not warrant at number 11 in the country. I think that's insane to me. So, again, I'm picking Washington. I think it will be a close game.